She worked at the hotel for years, moving quietly through long hallways carrying trays, listening to conversations that never included her name. Her uniform blended into the background, and her presence was noticed only when something was missing or needed. She learned early that in places like this employees were expected to be invisible, efficient, and silent. She accepted that role without complaint because life had taught her to value stability over recognition. The manager was known for his sharp tone and quick laughter. He had built his authority on confidence and habit, rarely questioning his own assumptions. He saw her as reliable but ordinary, someone who followed instructions and stayed in her place. Their interactions were brief, professional, and distant. He never asked about her life, and she never offered details because she had learned that stories were not welcome during service hours. Music had once been the center of her world. Long before uniforms and schedules, she had been known for her ability at the piano. She grew up practicing in small rooms, playing for family friends, and anyone willing to listen. Her talent was recognized early, and people spoke of her future with certainty. Yet circumstances shifted, responsibilities grew, and choices narrowed. She stepped away from music not because she lacked passion, but because survival demanded attention. Years passed, and the piano became something she carried inside rather than something she touched. She avoided concert halls and music stores because they reminded her of a version of herself she thought no longer existed. She told herself that talent unused eventually faded, and that it was better not to test that belief. She focused on work, routine, and responsibility, convincing herself that this was enough. One afternoon during a staff meeting, someone mentioned the piano in the event hall. A casual remark about music floated through the room, and she spoke without thinking. She said softly that she used to play. The manager laughed, instantly assuming it was a joke. He replied with confidence, saying if she played the piano, he would quit. The room filled with awkward smiles, and she felt heat rise to her face. She did not argue or explain. She simply nodded and returned to her duties. What the manager did not know was that she had once performed in places he admired from a distance. He did not know that she had studied under respected teachers, or that her name had once carried weight in musical circles. He did not know that life had redirected her path rather than diminished her ability. He saw only the uniform and the role she filled within his rules. That moment stayed with her long after the meeting ended. The laughter replayed in her mind, not as cruelty, but as certainty rooted in ignorance. She felt a mix of shame and resolve. She questioned whether she had truly left music behind, or if she had simply been waiting for a reason to return. She realized that the manager's words had not hurt because they were insulting, but because they reflected how completely she had disappeared in plain sight. Later that day, she walked past the piano in the event hall. It stood polished and untouched, placed there more as decoration than instrument. She stopped and looked at it longer than usual. Memories surfaced, not dramatic or painful, but steady and clear. She remembered how it felt to sit straight, how the keys responded to pressure, how music flowed when she allowed it. She placed her hand lightly on the edge of the piano, then pulled back, aware of where she was. She returned to work, but something inside her shifted. The comment that was meant as laughter had become a challenge, not one spoken aloud, but one she carried quietly. She did not feel anger toward the manager. Instead, she felt clarity. She understood that the world often judged based on appearance and role, and that truth rarely announced itself loudly. As the day ended, she went home and uncovered the old keyboard she kept hidden. She sat down, unsure of what would happen. Her fingers hesitated, then moved. Sound filled the room, hesitant at first, then stronger. She did not play to impress or prove anything. She played to remember who she was. That night she slept differently, not restless, not anxious, but aware. She knew that something had begun, not because someone doubted her, but because she finally questioned herself. She understood that the laughter had unknowingly opened a door, one she had closed long ago. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content without them. The next morning, she woke before her alarm and lay still, listening to the quiet of her small apartment. Her mind replayed the sound of the keyboard from the night before, and the feeling it brought back was both comforting and unsettling. She realized how much of herself she had kept hidden, not from others, but from her own courage. Getting ready for work, she felt the same weight of responsibility, but now it carried a quiet spark beneath it. At the hotel, the day unfolded as usual. Guests arrived, staff moved quickly, and instructions were given without emotion. She performed her duties with the same care and precision, but something in her posture had changed. She felt more present, more aware of herself within the uniform. She noticed the piano again as she passed the event hall, and this time she did not look away. The manager walked by, giving orders and joking with other staff. He did not acknowledge her beyond a brief nod. The laughter from the meeting still echoed in her memory, but it no longer stung the same way. It felt distant, like a sound that had lost its power. She understood now that his words were not a judgment of her truth, but a reflection of his limited view. During her break, she sat alone and thought about the years she had stepped away from music. She remembered the fear of choosing art over stability and the pressure of expectations placed on her. She had told herself that walking away was practical and mature, yet she now questioned whether it had also been an act of quiet surrender. She thought about the people who once believed in her talent, and how she had slowly stopped returning their calls. She remembered competitions, recitals, and late nights practicing with purpose. Music had given her identity and direction, and when she left it, She had lost more than sound, she had lost a part of how she understood herself. That afternoon, a senior coworker mentioned the upcoming luxury event. There would be guest sponsors, and a formal atmosphere. Someone joked that the piano would finally be used for once. The comment passed lightly, but it settled deeply in her chest. She wondered what it would feel like to sit there again, not as a memory, but as a present moment. When she returned home, she played again. The notes came easier this time, and her hands felt more certain. She did not rush or challenge herself. She allowed the music to guide her pace. The room filled with sound and memory, but also with something new, a sense of permission. She realized she did not need an audience to validate what she was doing. Over the following days, she practiced quietly each evening. Sometimes she played for 10 minutes, sometimes for an hour. She focused on connection rather than perfection. She noticed her confidence returning, not as boldness, but as steadiness. The piano no longer felt like a reminder of loss, it felt like an invitation. At work, she overheard staff discussing the manager and his comments. Some laughed, others shrugged. She did not join the conversation. She understood now that the story others told about her did not need correction. Her truth did not require explanation. As the event day approached, the hotel buzzed with preparation. The piano was polished, chairs were arranged, and lighting was tested. She watched from a distance, feeling calm rather than nervous. She had not decided anything yet, but she felt ready for whatever choice she would make. The night before the event, she barely slept, not from anxiety, but from reflection. She asked herself what she wanted, not what would impress others or prove someone wrong. She realized she wanted to play because music was part of her, not because she needed approval. That understanding brought peace. On the day of the event, she moved through her tasks with focus. Guests arrived dressed in elegance and confidence. Conversations filled the air, and the piano stood silently waiting. She felt no urgency, only awareness. She passed the manager, who gave instructions with his usual authority. He glanced at the piano and made a casual remark about hoping someone knew how to use it properly. She listened without reaction. The words no longer defined the moment. As the evening progressed, there was a pause in the schedule, a quiet gap where nothing was planned, and the room settled into anticipation. The piano stood untouched, and the space around it felt open. She stood nearby, feeling her heart steady. She realized that this moment was not about challenging the manager or correcting his laughter. It was about choosing whether to honor a part of herself she had long ignored. The decision was no longer heavy, it felt simple and true. She took a step forward, knowing that whatever happened next would come from her own voice, not from doubt or defiance, but from honesty. The legend the manager never knew was not defined by applause or titles. It was defined by resilience, patience, and the courage to begin again. She stood near the edge of the event hall holding a tray, while the room slowly settled into a softer rhythm. Guests had finished their conversations, and the atmosphere felt suspended, as if the space itself was waiting for something to happen. The piano remained untouched under the lights, and she felt a calm certainty rise within her, not excitement, not fear, just readiness. She glanced once toward the manager, who was speaking with a group of guests. Confident, relaxed, unaware of what was forming nearby. His earlier laughter no longer echoed in her mind. It had faded into something insignificant compared to the clarity she now felt. She understood that this moment was not about him at all. It was about her choosing to step into a truth she had carried quietly for years. She placed the tray down carefully and walked toward the piano with measured steps. Her movement drew a few curious looks, but no one stopped her. She did not announce herself or seek permission. She simply approached the bench as someone who belonged there because she did. As she sat down, the room did not fall silent immediately. There were still soft conversations and shifting chairs. She adjusted the bench slightly and rested her hands above the keys without touching them, yet she took a steady breath, feeling the familiar shape of the piano beneath her hands. The surface was cool and smooth, and the weight of the moment felt grounded rather than overwhelming. She began to play gently, allowing the first notes to enter the room without force. The sound was clear and warm, and it carried farther than she expected. Conversations paused slowly as people turned their attention toward the piano, not because they were instructed to, but because something authentic had reached them. Her hands moved with confidence, shaped by years of practice and experience. The music flowed naturally, not rushed, not restrained. It carried emotion without drama and strength without display. She did not look up, she focused on the keys and the sound, trusting that the music would speak for itself. As the melody continued, the room changed. People leaned forward, some stood still with glasses suspended in their hands, others felt something shift inside them. Without knowing why, the piano filled the space completely, and yet gently, as if it belonged there all along. The manager turned at last, drawn by the sound. His expression shifted from confusion to surprise. As he recognized the source, he stood frozen, watching the employee he had laughed at now commanding the room. Without effort, his certainty cracked, quietly replaced by disbelief. She did not notice him. She was fully present in the music, allowing memory and feeling to guide her hands. She remembered stages long past and rooms filled with listeners. But she also remembered playing alone late at night for no one but herself. All of it came together in this moment. The piece grew richer and more expressive, not louder, but deeper the emotion carried was not anger or triumph, but truth. It spoke of endurance, of choices made out of necessity, and of passion that never disappeared, only wait. Guests exchanged glances, realizing they were witnessing something rare, not a performance planned for them, but a moment of honesty unfolding naturally. Some felt emotion rise unexpectedly, others felt stillness settle within them. The music created a shared experience without asking permission. As she reached the final passage, her hands slowed, allowing each note to breathe. The sound lingered gently in the air before fading into silence. The room remained quiet for a few seconds, not out of confusion, but respect. No one rushed to react, because the moment needed space. Then applause began softly and spread through the hall, growing warmer and fuller. People stood without prompting, their appreciation sincere and unrestrained. The manager remained still, processing what he had seen and heard. The laughter he once offered felt distant and misplaced. She lifted her hands from the keys and stood slowly. She turned toward the room and offered a simple nod, not as a performer seeking praise, but as someone acknowledging connection. Her face showed calm and humility rather than pride. The applause continued, and she felt its warmth without letting it define her. She looked briefly toward the manager and met his eyes. He did not speak, he simply nodded, his expression changed by understanding. As she stepped away from the piano, she felt lighter, not because she had proven anything, but because she had honored herself. The legend that had lived quietly within her was no longer hidden, but it was also no longer something she needed to defend. The room slowly returned to motion, but it was not the same. Conversations carried a different tone, and people looked at her with new awareness. She returned to her place among the staff, but her presence felt changed, grounded, and visible. She knew this moment would carry forward, not as a confrontation, but as a turning point. The laughter had faded, and in its place stood respect, not demanded, but earned through truth and courage. When the applause finally settled, the room did not return to its earlier mood. Instead, it carried a quiet sense of reflection. Guests spoke more softly and moved with care, as if something meaningful had passed through them. She stepped back into her role, calmly picking up her tray and continuing her work, but inside she felt steady and clear rather than shaken. People began to look at her differently, not with exaggerated admiration, but with curiosity and respect. Some guests offered gentle smiles as she passed, others whispered to one another, clearly trying to understand what they had witnessed. She did not seek their attention, and she did not avoid it. She simply remained present and composed. The manager stood near the center of the hall longer than usual. His confidence had softened into thoughtfulness. He watched her move through the room, and for the first time seemed to notice her as a full person rather than a role. He did not approach her immediately. Instead, he observed quietly, as if recalibrating his understanding. Later that evening, during a quieter moment, he called her aside. His voice lacked its usual sharpness. He thanked her for the unexpected performance and admitted that he had been wrong. His words were simple and sincere, without excuses or justifications. She listened calmly and nodded, accepting the acknowledgement without triumph. She did not need an apology to feel validated. He asked about her background, and for the first time she shared pieces of her story, not in detail, but with honesty. She spoke of years of study, of performances, of life choices shaped by responsibility. He listened without interruption, and the distance between them narrowed into mutual respect. Word of the performance spread quickly through the hotel. Staff members from other departments approached her with warmth. Some expressed pride, others shared that they had no idea she carried such depth. She responded kindly, reminding herself that she too had once believed her music belonged only to the past. In the days that followed, guests continued to mention the performance. Some asked if she would play again, others simply thanked her for the experience. She did not make promises or plans. She allowed the moment to exist, as it was complete and meaningful without needing to become more. At home, she returned to the piano with renewed calm. She practiced not to prepare for another reveal, but to stay connected. She felt more grounded than she had in years. Music no longer felt like a dream she had abandoned. It felt like a language she had resumed speaking fluently. The memory of the manager's laughter no longer carried weight. It had transformed into a reminder of how easily people underestimated what they did not see. She felt no resentment, only clarity. She understood that she had outgrown the need for external permission. As work continued, she noticed subtle changes in herself. She spoke with more confidence and moved with ease. She set boundaries gently and communicated clearly. Her presence felt stronger, not louder, but assured. One afternoon, the manager invited her to his office again. This time he asked if she would consider playing at future events. Officially, he made it clear that there was no pressure and that her job would remain secure regardless. She thanked him and asked for time to consider. She appreciated the respect in his approach. She reflected carefully, knowing that opportunity often arrived disguised as obligation. She did not want to lose balance or chase validation. She wanted to move intentionally. She remembered how quickly life could pull her into directions that felt impressive but unsustainable. After several days, she agreed to play occasionally under clear terms. She would choose when and how often, and music would remain something she shared willingly. Rather than something demanded, the manager agreed without hesitation, recognizing the importance of her boundaries. Her coworkers celebrated, quietly offering encouragement and support. They respected her decision and admired her thoughtfulness. She felt grateful for their understanding and grounded by their consistency. The first official performance came weeks later in the same event hall. This time, she wore simple attire rather than a uniform. She walked to the piano with the same calm presence and played with the same honesty. The difference was not in the music, but in her intention. She was choosing this moment rather than stepping into it unexpectedly. The response was warm and appreciative, but she did not measure success by applause. She measured it by how true the experience felt to her. She felt aligned and present, and that was enough. After the performance, she returned home tired but fulfilled. She realized that her life had not changed overnight. It had shifted gradually, guided by self-respect. Rather than reaction, she slept peacefully, knowing she had taken a step that honored both her past and her present. She understood now that being a legend was not about recognition or reputation. It was about resilience, about carrying truth quietly. Until the moment came to share it, the manager's laughter had not diminished her. It had unknowingly set the stage for her return. As she continued forward, she carried this lesson with her. She did not need to prove her worth or wait for permission. She had reclaimed her voice, and that voice would guide her choices with steadiness and grace. In the weeks that followed, her life began to settle into a new pattern that felt unfamiliar yet steady. She continued her regular work shifts, but now music had a place in her schedule. Rather than living only in memory, she practiced in the evenings, choosing pieces that felt honest rather than impressive. She wanted her playing to reflect who she was now, not who she had been years ago. The hotel events where she played occasionally were calm and respectful. Guests listened with appreciation, and the staff treated her with quiet pride. She noticed how different it felt to be invited rather than to step forward unexpectedly. This time the choice was hers, and that sense of control brought peace. The manager maintained a professional, respectful distance. He no longer joked about her abilities or made assumptions. He consulted her about event needs and accepted her answers without pressure. Their relationship settled into one based on mutual understanding rather than authority alone. She appreciated the change, but did not dwell on it. She knew validation gained externally was not what sustained her. Outside the hotel, small opportunities began to appear. People who had attended events reached out politely, asking if she would consider playing at private gatherings or community functions. She responded thoughtfully, accepting only what fit her energy and values. She did not want music to become another obligation that drained her spirit. At home, her practice sessions deepened. She explored music slowly, listening to how each piece resonated emotionally. Some days she felt strong and confident. Other days doubt crept in, reminding her of the years she had spent away. She allowed those feelings to exist without judgment, trusting that consistency mattered more than confidence. She began reconnecting with people from her past. A former teacher heard about her performance and reached out with warmth rather than surprise. Their conversation was gentle and affirming, reminding her that talent did not vanish simply because life took a different turn. This connection helped heal a part of her that had felt unfinished. Her coworkers shared their own quiet dreams during late shifts. She listened attentively, recognizing familiar fear in their voices. She did not offer advice. Instead, she shared her experience, honestly emphasizing patience and self-trust. Her openness created space for others to reflect on their own possibilities. Financial responsibilities remained present. She budgeted carefully and avoided rushing into changes. She understood that stability allowed her to create without panic. Music felt sustainable now because it was supported by realistic choices. One evening, she was invited to play at a small community fundraiser. The venue was modest, and the audience diverse. Families, elders, and volunteers gathered for a shared cause. The atmosphere felt warm and genuine. She played with ease, letting the music flow naturally without performance pressure. Afterwards, several people thanked her quietly. One older man said the music reminded him of simpler times. A young woman shared that it gave her courage to revisit a forgotten passion. These interactions meant more to her than applause because they reflected connection rather than admiration. As time passed, she noticed her identity shifting. She no longer thought of herself as someone who used to play piano. She thought of herself as someone who played piano. Now the distinction felt important and grounding. She also noticed growth in how she carried herself. She spoke with clarity and moved with intention. She trusted her decisions even when they involved uncertainty. This confidence was not loud, it was calm and steady, built from alignment rather than achievement. Her relationship with music continued to evolve. She explored new pieces and revisited old ones, discovering different meanings, shaped by lived experience. Music became a mirror reflecting her journey rather than a measure of success. There were still moments when fear resurfaced late at night. She sometimes wondered if she was doing enough or risking too little. She met those thoughts with patience, reminding herself that growth did not require urgency, it required honesty. One quiet night after practice, she reflected on the moment that had started everything. The laughter in the meeting room felt distant, now not painful or powerful. Just a reminder of how easily people misunderstood what they could not see. She felt gratitude rather than resentment, knowing that moment had pushed her to listen to herself. She realized that her story was not about proving anyone wrong, it was about choosing herself again and again. Even when it felt uncomfortable, that choice shaped her days more than any performance ever could. As she prepared for future opportunities, she did so with care. She set boundaries, communicated openly, and protected her energy. She understood that sustainability was the true measure of success. Music had returned to her life not as a rescue, but as a companion. It walked beside her, supporting her through uncertainty and grounding her in purpose. She felt whole in a way she had not before. Looking ahead, she did not imagine a dramatic transformation. She imagined continued balance, steady progress, and meaningful connection. That vision felt enough. She closed the piano gently and prepared for rest, carrying gratitude for how far she had come and trust in the path unfolding before her, confident that honoring her truth would always guide her forward. As the months moved forward, she noticed how deeply music had settled into her everyday life, not as an interruption, but as a steady presence. She no longer counted the days since the event or measured progress by invitations or praise. Instead, she paid attention to how she felt when she played and how that feeling carried into the rest of her life. Her mornings began with more intention. She woke earlier, not out of urgency, but out of quiet excitement. She would stretch, make a simple breakfast, and sometimes sit at the keyboard for a few minutes before work, letting her fingers wake up alongside her thoughts. These small moments gave her clarity and focus that stayed with her through long shifts and busy hours. At the hotel, she remained professional and dependable. Her coworkers trusted her and her manager respected her boundaries. The dynamic between them had changed in subtle but meaningful ways. He listened when she spoke and consulted her when planning events that included music. Their conversations were calm and practical, built on mutual respect rather than authority alone. Guests continued to recognize her. Occasionally, some smiled warmly, others offered brief words of appreciation. She accepted these moments with grace without letting them inflate her sense of self. She understood now that recognition was fleeting, but self-respect endured. Outside of work, her circle grew slowly and naturally. Musicians, artists, and community organizers crossed her path through performances and gatherings. Conversations were thoughtful and sincere, focused on process rather than outcome. She felt comfortable among them because no one expected her to be anything other than honest. One afternoon, she was invited to participate in a small collaborative project at a local library. The idea was simple: an evening of music and shared stories centered around resilience and everyday courage. The concept resonated with her deeply. She agreed without hesitation, feeling that this kind of space aligned with her values. Preparing for the event, she chose pieces that reflected steadiness and reflection. She practiced with care, paying attention to phrasing and tone. She also spent time thinking about what the music meant to her and why she wanted to share it. This preparation felt different from earlier performances because it was rooted in purpose rather than nerves. The night of the library event arrived quietly. The room was filled with people of different ages and backgrounds. Chairs were arranged closely, creating an intimate atmosphere. She sat at the piano, feeling calm and grounded. When she began to play, the room grew still, not from expectation but from presence. The music unfolded gently, inviting listeners into a shared space of reflection. She played without rushing, allowing silence to breathe between phrases. She felt connected not only to the audience, but to herself. The experience felt complete and nourishing rather than demanding. After the performance, people approached her with thoughtful comments. Some shared personal stories. Others simply thanked her for the moment. She listened attentively, feeling grateful for the exchange. She realized that this kind of connection mattered more to her than any grand stage. In the weeks that followed, she reflected on how her definition of success had changed. She no longer chased milestones or compared herself to others. Instead, she measured success by alignment, by how closely her actions matched her values. This shift brought peace and stability. She continued mentoring a few students. Informally, teaching reminded her of the joy of discovery and the importance of patience. Watching others learn reinforced her belief that growth happened through consistency rather than pressure. She encouraged her students to listen to themselves and to find meaning in the process. Her own practice evolved as well. She explored new music and revisited old pieces. Hearing them differently through the lens of experience, she allowed herself to experiment without judgment, treating each session as exploration rather than performance. This freedom deepened her connection to the instrument. There were still moments of doubt, particularly when financial concerns resurfaced or when fatigue set in. During those times, she returned to simple routines: rest, reflection, and gentle practice. She reminded herself that sustainability required care, And that progress did not need to be dramatic to be real. One evening after a long day, she sat quietly at the piano and played a piece she had written herself. The melody was simple, but honest. As she played, she felt a sense of completion, not because she had reached an end, but because she was fully present in the moment. This feeling stayed with her long after the last note faded. She began to understand that her journey was not about reclaiming a lost identity, but about integrating all parts of herself. Her work, her music, her responsibilities, and her creativity existed together without conflict. This integration brought a sense of wholeness she had not known before. As time passed, she felt less need to explain her choices to others. She trusted her path and allowed it to unfold naturally. She said yes when it felt right, and no when it did not. This clarity protected her energy and kept her grounded. Looking ahead, she did not imagine a fixed future. She imagined continued growth, learning, and connection. She trusted that as long as she remained honest and attentive, she would find her way. Music remained her anchor and her guide. It reminded her to listen to herself and to others. It taught her patience, resilience, and compassion. Through it, she learned that quiet courage could shape a meaningful life. As she prepared for another modest performance, she felt gratitude for the journey so far. She understood that every step, even those taken in uncertainty, had led her here. She moved forward with calm confidence, knowing that honoring her truth was the greatest achievement she could claim. As the year continued, she felt a deeper sense of calm settle into her life, not because everything was easy, but because she trusted herself more than before. She noticed that she no longer rushed decisions or questioned her worth. When things moved slowly, instead, she listened carefully to what felt right and allowed her path to unfold at its own pace. Her performances remained modest in size but rich in meaning. She played in small halls, community spaces, and quiet gatherings where people came not to be impressed, but to feel something real. Each time she sat at the piano, she felt grounded, present, and honest. She did not try to be extraordinary. She focused on being sincere, and that sincerity reached people in ways she never expected. She also noticed how music shaped her daily interactions. She spoke with more patience and listened with more attention. She no longer felt the need to explain her choices or defend her balance between work and art. She trusted that those who mattered would understand, and those who did not were not meant to guide her life. The collaborative project with other artists slowly took form. They met regularly, sharing ideas, stories, and plans. The group valued openness and mutual respect. They supported one another through doubt and celebrated small victories together. She felt at home in this circle because there was no pressure to compete or impress, only a shared commitment to authenticity. As part of the project, she performed alongside storytellers and poets. Each performance felt like a conversation. Rather than a presentation, she played music that responded to spoken words, allowing sound and story to move together naturally. The experience expanded her understanding of expression and connection. Through these collaborations, she discovered new layers of creativity. She began composing more often, drawing inspiration from conversations, memories, and quiet observations. Her compositions were simple but thoughtful, reflecting lived experience. Rather than technical ambition, she did not rush to share them widely. She let them grow slowly, just as she had. Teaching also became a steady part of her life. She worked with students of different ages and backgrounds. Some were beginners, others returning to music after many years. She approached each lesson with patience and encouragement, focusing on curiosity rather than perfection. Watching her students gain confidence reminded her of her own journey and reinforced her belief that growth was possible at any stage of life. One afternoon after a lesson, a student asked her how she found the courage to begin again. The question stayed with her. She realized that courage had not arrived all at once. It had grown through small choices, through listening to herself, and through accepting uncertainty. She shared this honestly, knowing that truth mattered more than inspiration. Her financial situation remained stable through careful planning. She continued working part-time at the hotel, balancing responsibility with creative freedom. She appreciated the stability it provided and never felt ashamed of maintaining that balance. She understood now that security and passion could coexist without conflict. Her relationship with the manager remained respectful and professional. They spoke openly when needed and trusted one another. The laughter from the past no longer held any power. It had become a distant memory, a reminder of how little others could see beneath the surface. She also noticed how her story affected those around her. Coworkers shared dreams they had set aside. Friends spoke about changes they were considering. She listened without giving advice, allowing each person to find their own path. She knew that her role was not to lead, but to live honestly. As seasons changed, she felt gratitude for the quiet life she was building. There were no headlines or dramatic transformations, only steady growth, meaningful connections, and creative fulfillment. This was enough for her. She spent more time outdoors, walking in the early mornings, and reflecting on her journey. She thought about the younger version of herself, who once believed her dream had ended. She felt compassion for that version, understanding the choices she had made and honoring the strength it took to survive. Music continued to be her anchor on days when doubt returned. She sat at the piano and played softly, allowing sound to guide her back to center. She trusted that as long as she remained connected to herself, she would find clarity again. She no longer measured success by recognition or applause, she measured it by peace, by alignment, and by the ability to live truthfully. Each performance, each lesson, and each quiet moment contributed to that sense of fulfillment. Looking ahead, she did not plan far into the future. She focused on what she could do today: play, teach, listen, and rest. She trusted that the next steps would reveal themselves when the time was right. Her life felt whole not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. She had learned that true legend was not defined by fame or validation. It was defined by resilience, integrity, and the courage to return to oneself. As she prepared for another small gathering, she felt calm, gratitude, and readiness. She knew that whatever came next, she would meet it with the same quiet strength that had carried her this far, confident in the knowledge that she had chosen herself. And that choice would continue to guide her forward as time moved forward. She no longer felt the need to explain her journey to anyone. Her life had settled into a rhythm that felt honest and sustainable, and she trusted it deeply. Each day carried purpose, whether it involved work, teaching, playing, or simple rest. She had learned that meaning did not arrive through dramatic moments alone, but through consistency, care, and self-respect. The collaborative gatherings continued to grow quietly. People returned, bringing friends and family, drawn by the warmth and sincerity of the space. Music, stories, and shared reflection flowed together naturally. And she often found herself opening or closing these evenings at the piano. Her playing felt grounded and intentional, never rushed, never forced. She understood now how to listen to a room and respond with sensitivity. Her compositions became more confident over time, not louder or more complex, but clearer. Each piece reflected a season of her life: patience, loss, renewal, and calm. She shared them selectively, trusting her instincts about when and where they belonged. The response was thoughtful and genuine, and that mattered more to her than wide attention. Teaching remained a source of deep fulfillment. She watched students grow in confidence, not only musically, but personally. She encouraged them to approach learning with kindness toward themselves. She saw how music helped them express feelings they could not yet name, and she felt grateful to be part of that process. Her work at the hotel gradually became a smaller part of her life. She reduced her hours, thoughtfully ensuring stability while allowing more space for music and community involvement. When she eventually stepped away fully, it was without regret or ceremony. She left with gratitude for what that chapter had provided and confidence in what lay ahead. Life continued to present challenges, as it always would. There were moments of fatigue, uncertainty, and quiet doubt. But she met them with resilience, shaped by experience. She no longer questioned her worth when things felt slow. She trusted that growth often happened beneath the surface. Music remained her constant companion. Sometimes it was expressive and full, other times quiet and reflective. She allowed both without judgment. She understood now that creativity thrived when given space and patience. She spent more time nurturing relationships, sharing meals, walking with friends, and enjoying silence. These moments grounded her and reminded her that fulfillment was built from many small sources, not just one passion. Looking back, she saw clearly that the moment when the manager laughed was never about humiliation. It was a mirror showing her how completely she had hidden from herself, that laughter had unknowingly offered her a choice, and she had chosen courage. She often thought about how many people carried hidden talents and unspoken dreams. She hoped that her story encouraged others, not through spectacle, but through honesty. She believed that change did not require permission, only willingness. As years passed, she felt no urgency to define herself by titles or achievements. She was a musician, a teacher, a worker, a friend, and a learner, all at once. She allowed these identities to coexist without conflict. One quiet evening after a small gathering, she stayed alone at the piano. The room was warm and still. She played softly, letting each note settle fully. She felt peace, not because everything was resolved, but because she was present and aligned. She understood that fulfillment was not a destination. It lived in moments like this, in connection, authenticity, and self-trust. That understanding became the foundation of her life. As she closed the piano and prepared to leave, she felt gratitude for every step taken, including those shaped by fear and necessity. She honored her past without being bound by it. Her life did not become extraordinary in the way stories often promise. It became meaningful. And that was enough. The manager once laughed, not knowing she was a legend from the beginning, but she had learned that the truest legend was quiet resilience and the courage to return to oneself again and again, again and again.